Your suspicions are right. Well, sort of. Your past shapes your future, but it doesn't have to be permanent. Here's the good news. You're not doomed to repeat your parents' mistakes. The bad news? Those old patterns you thought you left behind might already be affecting how you parent today. But don't worry. There's a way to break the cycle of generational trauma and create the kind of connection and stability you want your children to have. I've been studying what Dr. Gabor Mate has to say on the subject. He's a renowned expert on trauma, addiction, stress, and childhood development. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. For some, it takes multiple tries confronting one's own reality. But doing the work will totally change how you view yourself as a parent. If you've ever felt like your reactions as a parent come out of nowhere, or you catch yourself echoing the very behaviours you swore you'd avoid, this video is for you. Quick question. Have you ever noticed yourself reacting to your child in a way that feels familiar, like something your own parents would have done? Drop a quick comment below. What's one parenting habit you've noticed that might have roots in your own upbringing? I'd love to hear. So how does generational trauma shape the way we parent? And what can we do to stop it? The stakes couldn't be higher. Your choices today can reshape your children's future and the legacy you leave for generations to come. Think of generational trauma as an invisible thread running through your family's story. Every time you respond to your child, that thread pulls a little bit tighter, unless you decide to cut it. To understand generational trauma a little bit better, imagine this. A family's emotional and psychological health is like a garden, passed down from generation to generation. The first gardener, scarred by a violent storm, trauma, plants seeds of thorny, invasive plants without realising it. These represent maladaptive coping mechanisms and unresolved pain. The second gardener, their son or daughter, inherits this tangled plot, unsure which plants are helpful and which are harmful. They do their best, but the thorns and vines persist. The third gardener, the next generation, a child, grows up in this garden, pricked by unseen thorns, unsure why it feels so hard to navigate. But here's the turning point. That third gardener, you, can decide whether to keep struggling or learn how to restore the garden, nurturing a healthier, more vibrant environment for you and your children. This is where the teachings of Dr. Gabor Mate come in. He shows us how to identify those thorny patterns of generational trauma and break the cycle, transforming the emotional health of your family for generations to come. Just like the overgrown garden, trauma begins by creating disconnection, both from ourselves and from others. As Dr. Gabor Mate explains, this is the root of generational trauma, and it has a profound impact on children.
If you remember that trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you, it's the wound. People can be wounded not just by bad things happening to them, but small children can be wounded in loving families where they don't get their needs met. I mean, that's obvious in the physical sense. If a child doesn't get proper nutrition, their body will suffer, their mind will suffer. We're also creatures with emotional needs as important as our physical needs. So when the child's emotional needs are not met, that child is wounded.
But what exactly happens inside us when we experience trauma? Why does it create this disconnection? Trauma distorts how we relate to the world around us. It creates barriers that disconnect us from our own emotions, from the people we love, and from the ability to trust the world from our gut feelings. This is why when parenting, you might find yourself reacting in ways that seem automatic, unexplainable, or even harmful. Those reactions are the echoes of unresolved pain.
How long would you survive out there in nature if you ignored your gut feelings? You wouldn't. You'd be dead. That's how important gut feelings are. What makes us disconnect from our gut feelings so that they're actually even there telling you and you ignore it? Well, you've been disconnected from yourself. That's the first impact of trauma, is a disconnection from the self.
This disconnection from our instincts and emotions leaves us vulnerable, not just to repeating these patterns, but to passing them down to our children. Which brings us to the next key idea: how generational trauma affects brain development and behaviours. Generational trauma isn't just about the emotional scars we carry. It's also about how those experiences shape the very biology and emotional development of our children. Dr. Mate sheds light on this process.
When a mother carries an infant, the stresses and traumas that she is burdened with can affect the developing brain and personality of the child already in the womb already.
This means that stress and trauma don't just live in our minds. They literally shape the brains of the next generation. Through stress hormones, emotional cues, and epigenetic changes, children absorb their parents' unresolved pain even before birth. Research backs this up. Mothers who experience emotional neglect in their own childhoods were found to have infants with stronger connections between the amygdala, the brain's fear centre, and the frontal cortex at just 1 month old. This altered brain connectivity can influence how a child handles stress, processes emotions, and responds to the environment throughout their life. But the biological transmission of trauma doesn't stop there. Once born, children also absorb their parents' patterns through observation and emotional resonance. Our own unresolved pain shapes how we respond to stress, and those responses become a model for our children. For example, have you ever snapped at your child over something trivial, only to realise that it actually wasn't really about them? Or maybe you felt overwhelmed when your child asked for attention, triggering old feelings of inadequacy from your own childhood. These moments of stress and disconnection aren't just fleeting, they're part of what gets passed down. So while the biological changes create a starting blueprint, the gardener metaphor still holds. The emotional and behavioural patterns you model for your children either nurture or further entangle that inherited garden. Recognising this isn't about blame. It's about realising that you have the power to intervene in both spheres. And it begins with recognising trauma's patterns and taking steps to heal. The good news is, generational trauma isn't a life sentence. As Dr. Mate explains, awareness and intentional action can break the cycle and create a healthier emotional landscape for you and your children.
All the pain you didn't want to feel and you've been running away from through your compensatory behaviors, like your addictions, are nothing but an attempt to escape from pain. That's all they are. That's all they, they're not a disease. They're not a genetic, whatever it is. Addictions are very simply an attempt to escape pain, which create more pain. See, trauma, as I define it, is not about what happens to us. It's about what happens inside of us as a result of what happens to us. And so the wound in trauma means wound. So the wound in this case is my sense of deficiency or not being good enough, not being worthy enough. Once I realize that, this has got nothing to do with anything except this interpretation that I made of my own experience all those years ago, then when I notice it, I can no longer believe it. I don't have to any longer be a subject to that interpretation of myself in the world. So awareness is one step. It's not adequate, but it's an essential step towards letting go.
I think Dr. Gabor Mate's words resonate deeply here. The attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. This simple and profound insight explains why our efforts to numb, avoid, or deny our pain often backfire. The pain doesn't disappear. It lingers, festers, and manifests in harmful ways. So what's the answer? How do we escape generational trauma? The answer lies in a courageous shift, turning towards the pain rather than running from it. Start with awareness. Take a moment to notice when you're avoiding or numbing. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Why does this pain feel so unbearable? Awareness is the first step to breaking the cycle of avoidance. Practice acceptance without judgment. Pain is a natural human experience, not a sign of failure. As Dr. Mate teaches, treating pain with curiosity and compassion allows us to process it rather than prolong it. Seek support and connection. Pain is easier to carry when shared. This could be a therapist, a friend, or a supportive group. Connection helps create a safe space to explore the roots of your suffering. Avoiding pain often means ignoring its origin. Take time to reflect on the deeper wounds or unmet needs that the pain might be pointing to. Healing these roots allows the pain to dissipate rather than perpetuate. Dr. Mate says there's tremendous healing possible. The key is making the choice to stop running from the pain and instead face it head on. When we stop trying to escape, Pain becomes a teacher, not an enemy. It reveals the patterns, traumas, and unmet needs that require our attention. As difficult as it sounds, turning towards the pain is the only way to truly heal and to avoid passing unresolved trauma to the next generation. If you find yourself frequently losing your temper and yelling at your kids, then it may be tied to unresolved generational trauma and patterns you've inherited. Breaking the cycle starts with understanding where those reactions come from and learning healthier ways to respond. My new community, Empowered Parent Blueprint, tackles this very issue to help you turn your home from a place of chaos to calm. I'll pop a link in the description. In my next video, I'll share some more practical strategies to break free from the yelling cycle and create a calmer, more connected relationship with your child. Click here to watch, and I'll see you there.